All right. So again, thank you so much for being here for the Spring 2024 Finance Summit. This is an overview of what we will be covering in today's summit. So we will talk through on-campus accounts, what that means to have allocated accounts versus agency accounts. We'll walk through some funding sources that are available, as well as a highlight for one-time allocations. We'll hear from a member of the Student Government Association's One-Time Allocations Committee to talk through what that process looks like. After SGA presents, we will talk through fundraising on campus and managing and spending your funds, what those guidelines look like. We'll also talk through all-campus allocations. We have the Student Affairs Business Office here to present on what that process looks like for the eligible student organizations that this applies to. And then we will also leave time at the end for any questions that you have. Again, like I said, I will pause the recording at the end of this session so that you can ask those specific questions for us. We'd be happy to answer what we can at the moment, and we will also provide the content for reaching us as well. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I mentioned those different types of accounts for student organizations. I wanted to highlight two of those here with the details of what each of those entail. So the first of these being student activity fee accounts. So with these, note that student organizations must apply to receive an allocation for student activity fee funding. If you are granted these funds, they are held in an account within the Student Affairs Business Office. As we'll talk about a little bit later, please note that in order to be eligible for all-campus allocations, this is a requirement for you to be eligible, for you to have applied to one-time allocations at least twice and or the Student Affairs Diversity Fund. So note that there is eligibility before you receive all-campus allocations, which are related to these student activity fee accounts. Again, with student activity fee accounts, note that they are closely monitored by the business office since they are held within this office. All spending must adhere to the student activity fee guidelines, which we will talk through in a few slides later. We'll give some highlights of what those guidelines allow, but I highly encourage you, if you're an organization that this applies to, please read through the entirety of the student activity fee guidelines. Also note with these type of accounts that funds must be spent within one fiscal year, meaning that the funds do not roll over into the next year. So that's student activity fee accounts. On the other side of this is agency accounts. So looks a little bit different. Any registered student organization can open an agency account through the business office unless you're allocated student activity fee funds by all-campus allocations. So note that this is different from the student activity fee process entirely. This account is like an on-campus bank account, right? So there's no checks or cards necessarily, but it's like you having funds on campus to access directly. Funds do roll over from year to year as well, so you'll note that this is a difference from the student activity fee account. So keep note of that. And additionally, with agency accounts, there are less spending rules because these are not subject to student activity fee guidelines. Instead, these are subject to USG spending policies. So those are the two different types of accounts that student organizations can have access to. Okay, wanted to hit on a few funding sources. There are 5 in particular that I wanted to walk through. There's a few that will be highlighted in much more detail later on in this presentation. But each of these funding sources are allocated through a specific applications process, and you can receive funding from these once each fiscal year as well. So just take note of that as you are deciding which funding is the best fit for your student organization. I will also go ahead and drop the agency account information in the chat as well from the last slide, so you have access to that. Okay, so back to the funding sources, wanted to highlight some here. One-time allocation funds, we will go through this in more depth through a representative from SGA, but these are one-time allocations that they can award through funds that they have within their organization. The Student Affairs Diversity Fund is one that is funded through the Student Affairs Advisory Board, and I will include the link in the chat for the Student Affairs Diversity Fund. At this time, please note that the maximum amount for this fund, the amount requested, is a maximum of $500. All-campus allocations is another form of funding source. We will go in much more detail with our experts from the business office when the time comes. But eligible organizations will learn more about what it means to receive funding from all-campus allocations and what that proposal process looks like for this upcoming year. Two additional funding sources are listed here on this slide, and I will provide the link for RHA, external allocations, at this time. You can apply through the Residence Hall Association, is what RHA stands for there. And note that the maximum request for an event there is $900. And then the last funding source is one that is certainly very autonomous for the student organization, is fundraising. So we'll go through more in depth what fundraising for your student organization looks like on campus. And we'll talk through the form and policies and the do's and don'ts, if you will, of fundraising for your student organization. Okay, that was a brief overview, and this is perfect timing because I see that we have Lauren Baker from the Student Government Association's One-Time Allocation Committee is joining us today, and she is going to talk through the One-Time Allocation Fund and what that means to get funding through this. So Lauren, whenever you're ready, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera on for us, and I can click through the slides for you to present on One Time.
Okay, thank you. My camera says it's on, but I'm just not sure if it's like enabled or what.
No
But
worries.
I am happy if you guys can hear me perfectly fine. I am happy to just talk about it. Sorry about that.
No worries.
And you can go to the next slide, whatever. Okay, so I'm filling in for Gabby today, who is the treasurer of the Student Government Association. Her email and phone number are listed here. She's very available by email or text. And then the Student Government Association executive officers also have offices on the second floor of Tate, so you can find her there, which is also where we typically have our hearings in the mornings. So what the one-time allocation fund is, so the Student Government Association has the ability to make a recommendation for the allocation of funds to student organizations on campus who've expressed their need for financial assistance in regard to putting on programs and traveling. So for example, a lot of times what we'll do is if you have like a specific event that you can give us an itemized budget for, that's something that we can do. So for example, in the fall, there's a lot of clubs that do like a Halloween event or holiday-based things, and that's typically something that we would be able to fund. A lot of like one-time like consumable materials or reusable things if you're keeping them on campus. So all registered student organizations are eligible as long as you're not receiving money through the all-campus allocations process. So if you're not coming to see us in March when we do the big all-campus, you are eligible to come see us one time per semester at the one-time allocation fund hearings. So there's a lot of rules and stipulations that I don't think I'll be able to get all into today, but they are all on the Student Government Association website. So you can find them under initiatives. And then that will also, the application is on the involvement network though. So these are some examples of hearings that we held last year. Like I said, the one-time like events are pretty popular, but we've also done like a plane ticket for travel, registration fees, or sometimes we do like roster fees for conferences that clubs want to travel to. The decorations are also something pretty simple that we can do. Something really easy for us is reservations for somewhere like Tate Grand Hall, or if you're kind of renting out a lot of spaces on campus. I know a lot of them have been made free, but if you're using like the AV or audio equipment, you have to pay for that. We can help you guys out with that typically, and then bringing us like a receipt or invoice from Tate Print and Copy or any other kind of printing things is something that we are typically able to fund as well. So now I'm going to talk about the application process and how you guys can apply. So as I said previously, it's on the Involvement Network. You can find it through the Student Government Association forms, or you can just search in the search bar one-time allocation fund. The 2020-23, the 23-24 one is the only one that should be open. And it's kind of like a rolling basis. So once you apply, Gabby will email you if you've been selected to be heard, and then when and like where you'll need to meet. And these are the remaining steps in the process. So we have 3 left in our terms. So our terms in the current administration of SGA end on April. I think they end on April 2nd, actually. So we have one on the very last day of our terms, which is exciting. But we've added some extra hearings this past year. So there's a lot of opportunity to be heard, you and your student organization. There are typically 5 slots every morning. We go from 8 to 9 a.m. And meet in person in the ELS. So you will submit your application and then receive an email from Gabby with your hearing date and your time. And then you will confirm that you can attend. You will attend and you will give about just a 5-minute presentation telling us about what your club does, the mission, how it benefits UGA students, and then you'll tell us what you're going to plan on using the money for, and then we'll have 5 minutes for the committee to ask questions. So there are 4 of us students on the committee. We all ask questions. Our administrators also in the room, but we do try to do a great job of working hard to give you all the money that we can. And then afterwards, hopefully about a week, Gabby will write up our decision and give it to you, and then you will work with ELS staff to get your money or your reimbursement, however we decide to do that. So this is just an example of what you would receive after you have submitted after you've submitted your application. So again, it'll say your time. And this is kind of what I was explaining earlier, that you'll have 3 to 4 minutes. You're not allowed to use presentation materials, but it's also super casual. You just kind of come in and chat with us. It's not meant to be an intimidating process at all. We really are just students talking to students. So yeah, you would just respond to that email confirming your presence and that you're going to be there. And then we will be expecting you whenever that is, from 8 to 9. And then after you've come and present to us and we've made our decision about our allocation that we have decided to award your organization, you would get an email. And then you would work with Becky in the ELS office for the next couple days to receive your actual award. Yeah, I don't know everything about that, but and then, yeah, after we've awarded your funds, you would reply to an email and set up time to meet with Becky Garrett. This meeting must be set up within 14 days of receiving your award, and then she will explain the purchase and reimbursement process depending on which method works best for like whatever type of accounts you have for your organization. So again, this is just kind of an overview. Roadmap of how it works. Make sure to read the guidelines because there are a couple very specific things that we can't fund. And then make sure your event program or travel is eligible, and that would just be done by reading the guidelines and making sure they match up. And then you would submit your application through the Involvement Network, and then you would receive an email from Gabby for your hearing date and respond to that and confirm that you will be able to be present. And then you will present to our committee for 3 to 4 minutes. It's really not supposed to be hard. And then there will be time for us to ask questions, typically just clarifying questions on either how you're going to spend the money, specifics that we have on your budget. And we also have the budget that you submitted in front of us. So there's no need to bring any materials or presentation materials, anything like that. And then you would just await your decision and then follow the reimbursement process that I just spoke about with Becky. And this is Gabby's contact information. She's treasurer for SGA. I'm also happy to try to answer any questions if there's any right now. Other than that, you're welcome to contact Gabby. Her information is here. And if you don't get a chance to take a screenshot, it's all on the UGA SGA website as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren, for presenting on one time. Again, if you do not receive All-Campus Allocations, this is a fantastic source to lean into for your student organization. And like Lauren said, they're very responsive and want to award as much funds as they can to student organizations looking to host events and travel and do the things that they want to do. So Lauren, again, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And so with that, we will continue with our presentation and talking through another funding source, which I had mentioned in the beginning, and that is on-campus fundraising. So in the chat right now, I'm going to go ahead and put the solicitation policy. Please note that your on-campus fundraisers must also abide by solicitation policy, which we will touch on in a couple of slides here, but wanted to give you that documentation from the beginning. So to back up a little bit, on-campus solicitation or fundraising is known as requesting money, funds, or goods on campus for any reason, seeking agreement to pay, taking subscriptions, selling merchandise or services, partnering with a commercial entity, or offering materials or privileges to others via promotion or advertisement. So that is our formal definition, and note that this is something you'll regularly see, around TATE and MLC, right? People having tables and fundraising. More often than not, they do require a permit through our office, and so I wanted to talk through the process for getting permits and what that looks like. So again, I mentioned solicitation policy, so I wanted to hit on a few of the highlights here. Solicitation must be in compliance, certainly with all state laws and the rules, regulations, and policies of the university and the Board of Regents. Your solicitation must be for the benefit of your student organization or a registered nonprofit or charitable entity. It also, as we'll talk about in a little bit, must be approved by ELS via our fundraising and collection request form. And it also must be conducted by the student organization with a representative from the organization present at all times when you are conducting your fundraising activity or event. Some do nots of solicitation are, it should not be for the benefit of an individual or a vendor/commercial entity. So promotion of a commercial entity as a part of your fundraiser is not permitted by solicitation policy. It should not involve sale of food that is made by individual members. We'll touch on that again here in a couple of slides. It should not be conducted without securing the appropriate approval and permits. And again, also should not interfere with university programs or functions. So for example, if the university is closed, you should not be conducting fundraising activities. So I've mentioned the fundraising and collection request form that you can complete if you're looking to host a fundraiser on campus. So I wanted to walk through the timeline of what that looks like. Once you submit a request, which is located on the involvement network, similar to Lauren shared for the one-time allocation request that is on SGA's page, for the fundraising request form that is located on the main page of involvement network under campus links. You'll find that link there. So we highly recommend, if you're looking to fundraise on campus, that you complete this form within 4 weeks prior to your event. And I'll go into a little bit why we recommend that in the next slide in particular. But note that that's something that from the get-go, if you know that you're going to fundraise a month out as soon as possible, go ahead and put that request in with our office so that we can get to step 2 here, which is processing your request and issuing you your permit. If there are any pieces of feedback that we need to give for your permit, if a change needs to be made or a piece of information needs to be clarified, we will give you that feedback and try to get it to you as soon as possible within that 5 business day turnaround. Once you are approved and you receive your fundraising permit, it will be sent to you around 7 or 8 o'clock p.m. Via the email that you list in your request form. Once you receive the permit from us via email, you can then move forward with campus reservations to make the reservation for your on-campus fundraiser. Within 5 days of making your reservation, you'll receive a reservation confirmation from CRETS, and then certainly promote your fundraiser in the location so that you can have some individuals stop by and take part. And then obviously step 4 is you get to the day of your fundraiser and you do host it. I believe this is mentioned in the next slide, but if it's not, just wanted to highlight, when you do have your fundraiser, you do need to have a copy of your permit from us at your table or somewhere in the vicinity of the space that you're reserving. That is so folks, if anybody stops by and asks, they know that you have a permit from ELS to conduct this fundraising activity. You can have it on your phone or you can have a printed copy. A few things to remember with the fundraising form. Like I said in the last slide, we recommend submitting 4 weeks in advance, but at minimum, you should be submitting this form at least 2 weeks in advance of your event. Again, from the time it takes our office, we try to get it to you within 5 business days, and then certainly meeting the 5 business days prior to your event for reserving with Krebs. That gets you a little bit farther out, right? So we're all about proactive thinking and thinking ahead with your fundraisers. So as soon as you know that you are going to fundraise, please go ahead and submit that form to us. You must have a fundraising permit issued before you can submit that request to Campus Reservations to book your space. Also, again, approval of a fundraising request is not a confirmation of space reservation, so you must receive the permit from us, then approach Campus Reservations to get that space. In the request form, we say that more detail is always better. Please give us an in-depth description of how you are planning to fundraise, including where your food, merchandise, supplies are coming from, how the funds will be used, all of those details so that we can get you as close to approval as possible from the first submission of that form. Regarding merchandise in particular, you must secure trademarks approval for any merchandise that you are selling that contains UGA trademarks or images. We'll talk through trademarks in a little bit, highlighting a few of their policies, but please know that when you submit a fundraising request, if any of your merchandise has fundraising approval, we do have to have that signed form from them first prior to approving. Let's say, for example, you submit your request, it gets approved, fantastic, but there's a last minute change that you want to make to your permit. We can update permits. It is for a smaller amount of details that are changed, and that only being if you're changing the date of your fundraiser, but all the other things are staying the same. So let's say, for example, you have a fundraiser that is taking place on Wednesday and your organization has decided it needs to take place the following Wednesday. We just ask that you submit a written request to us via email at ugaels@uga.edu. We must receive that in writing, and then we can proceed with updating your permit, and you will receive that updated permit via email as well. If you are changing any other details, such as adding a piece of merchandise that you're selling, or a different type of food, or anything else that is just changing the date or the time, you will need to submit a new fundraising request. So please keep that in mind. We can only take update requests for date and time. Okay, I've just listed a few kind of examples of fundraisers here. I'm sure for the folks in the room who are joining us live, you've already got some that you're thinking of for your organization or ones that you've done in the past as examples. So these are just some additional ideas of common ones that we see through our request process. Wanted to highlight a few things here. For food, again, just wanted to remind folks that food must be prepackaged from a store or vendor prepared. It cannot be made by members of the student organization. Those requests, if it lists that food is being made by members of the organization, those requests will be denied. So please keep that in mind when you're searching for how to conduct those type of fundraisers. I already talked about merchandise sales and the necessity for having trademarks approval. And selling tickets or registration for an event. We'll talk through a resource on campus that you can go through to assist with this process. That is a secure form of doing so. Again, just a few notes here at the bottom. Student organizations and their members could be individually liable for injury caused by the implemented activities, so know that that is a liability that you take on as a student organization by hosting a fundraiser on campus. And again, to align with solicitation policy, please ensure that you are not advising for any commercial enterprises at your event, whether that's a vendor, a restaurant, or another for-profit entity. A few limitations here that I wanted to highlight. So raffles, if you list that you are intending to have a raffle for a fundraiser, those are illegal in the state of Georgia and are prohibited without a proper license from the county. So our definition of a raffle is any type of drawing where you can increase your odds of winning by purchasing more tickets. So if there is free entry, there's a little bit of gray area of what you can do instead. We've talked about silent auctions before. We've talked about other ways that you can have things to give away, right? But raffles in particular are something that you cannot do without a permit from the county. If there's any hesitation of if your event may be a raffle and we maybe just don't know that it is, when you're talking about it with your board, feel free to contact us and we can chat through the specifics to see if that's considered a raffle. Bake sales, again, I've already hit on in the last slide, but the sale of food prepared by members of the organization will not be approved. So please provide that detail in your description of your fundraising request that it is purchased from a store or vendor prepared. And off-campus fundraising, we know that these are popular, right? We think about percentage nights being a great example here. Our office does not issue permits for off-campus fundraisers, as this falls outside the jurisdiction of our policy. So your student organization is responsible for ensuring you are following all applicable laws and policies related to off-campus fundraisers. So if you are having a percentage night at an off-campus location, for example, you do not need to submit a request to us because we do not issue permits for off-campus fundraisers. Collecting funds, I mentioned in a couple slides prior, when you're thinking about selling tickets or collecting donations, if you have an agency account or receive student activity fees, you can set up a secure payment portal through the UGA One Card office. This is incredibly secure platform for collection of funds. I've listed some examples here of what that link can be used for. So things like collecting dues or donations, or selling merchandise or tickets to an event, and also general fundraising. Their website I will put in the chat here in just a moment, but that is something that I highly recommend if you are an applicable organization that this applies to based on the type of account that you have. Please utilize our UGA One Card office. Okay, student activity fee guidelines. This information that I'm going to talk about in this slide applies to organizations who receive funds through one-time allocations, all-campus allocations, or the Student Affairs Diversity Fund. So please note, I've listed some highlights here, but again, I'm going to share the link to the guidelines in the chat right now. I highly recommend that you read through the entirety of this document to ensure that you are fulfilling policy. But I'll list some highlights verbally here. Your programs and activities must be open to any interested student. All allocated organizations must deposit all the money into the account housed within the business office. So there are not any allowance for any outside checking accounts. Some general expenditure guidelines here. There's a few listed additionally in the document, but these are three that we wanted to hit on in particular today. Charitable contributions are not allowed. Gifts and awards. Note that annual awards through recognition, we recognize that there's banquets and award ceremonies, right? So those can certainly take place, but those annual recognition awards can only be purchased through UGA Mart, and the maximum is $30 per item, one time per fiscal year. And then additionally, gift cards, not allowed at all. So those are three highlighted expenditure guidelines there. Expenditures for food, student travel, and or promo items, no more than 40% of the allocated funds can be spent on the combination of those three things for food, travel, and promo items. Expenditures for promo items in particular, those similar to annual recognition awards must be ordered through UGA Mart, and the maximum is $30 per item there. And then expenditures for entry fee are permitted upon completing the event registration form, which I will share the link to the general list of forms through the business office towards the end of today's presentation. So I wanted to highlight a few ways to make purchases, again, for organizations that have student activity fee accounts or agency accounts in particular. So there's four listed here. UGA Mart is the university's primary resource for purchasing goods or services. Multiple vendors have integrated stores within UGA Mart. A few listed here are Amazon for Business and Staples. So please note that for these type of accounts, all purchases for promo items, t-shirt, apparel, uniforms, items with logos, or anything over $2,500 must be purchased through a vendor that is integrated within the UGA Mart platform. Another way to make a purchase is through an inter-university charge. So there's many on-campus university services, for example, tape print and copy, campus reservations, dining services, just to name a few, that do allow a student organization to make purchases via a direct transfer of funds from your student activity fee account or your agency account. Another type of purchase method is through payment requests. So these can be processed by the business office to pay an invoice directly to a supplier or vendor. And then finally is individual reimbursements. Is an option. It is. It certainly is one that is a little bit more work to put in, right? Because there's organization members making purchases with their own personal money. So there's a little bit more liability there to then be reimbursed for said purchase. So if possible, for student activity fee accounts and agency accounts, we love to recommend the top 3 type of purchasing when possible, and to hopefully avoid reimbursements. We understand situations may necessitate it, but there's certainly more liability in that form. Just quickly wanted to highlight some additional resources here for specific types of purchasing. So for food purchases, starting here, organizations with agency accounts have no spending limits for food purchases as long as they meet those USG policies, as we talked about right at the beginning. On the other side, organizations with student activity fees must comply with student activity fee guidelines. Again, no more than 40% of their allocation can be spent on combination of food, travel, and promotional materials. And there are also per diem rates that must be adhered to, particularly with food. So please make note of that when you are purchasing from a vendor, that you're meeting per diem. For student travel in particular, all organizations need to submit the student travel form through the Student Affairs Business Office 2 weeks prior to travel. Again, I'll share the link to their forms page towards the end there, but that link to the form is on that website. And if the organization receives student activity fee funds, again, one more time, no more than 40% of the allocation can be spent on that combo of food, travel, and promo items. Also noting that all participants will need to have paid their student activity fees in order to do so. Okay, I have talked through a lot of information, and Lauren has spoken to us about one-time allocations. I'm going to pass the mic over to some experts from the Student Affairs Business Office to talk through all-campus allocations. Before we introduce them, I do want to note again, whether you're joining us live today or if you're watching the recording after this, please know in order to be eligible for all-campus, student organizations must have completed one of the following, which is receiving one-time allocations for 2 consecutive fiscal years, or receiving student affairs diversity fund allocations for 2 consecutive fiscal years. So the Student Affairs Business Office has already reached out to primary contacts of organizations who are eligible for all campus allocations this year. Therefore, if you're on the call today or watching after the call, if your organization has not received communications from the Student Affairs Business Office already, your organization is not eligible for all campus for spring 2024. So just wanted to make that note. If you're thinking you may be eligible, note that they have already communicated to primary contacts if you are for this fiscal year. So I will pass it over to June and Aiden. Aiden, if you need more hosting abilities or have trouble sharing your screen, let me know and I will troubleshoot, but I will pass the mic over to y'all.
Hi, everyone. I'm June, and I have Aiden with me, who's going to share the screen in a moment for the process of all-campus allocations. I just want to refer to something that Rachel said. If you think that you may be qualified for all-campus and you didn't get an invitation, those were sent out on January 31st, by the way. So if you didn't get one, it may be that the time frame is a little different than what you think it might be. the fiscal years that we are looking at for invitations for this year were FY22 and FY23. And you do have to apply in 2 consecutive years. So if you skip a year, then you're obviously starting over from square one with the 2 consecutive years. So you may have done something first semester of FY24, but that's not what we were looking at for this year. So I get that information from the people who dispersed the funds from the one-time allocation and from the VP Diversity. They give me the list of the people who have applied for 2 consecutive years. So that's where that happens. And those emails were sent out on January 31st. So now let's talk about what happens if you did get one of those invitations. The email would say it's budget time. And those emails, like I said, were sent out January 31st. Everything that you need is included in the email. You have all the instructions plus the budget templates that you would complete for your organization's activities to come up with the request that you want to make to the All-Campus Allocations Committee for the allocation that you think you would need for the entire year. And this year you will be applying for FY25. That's going to start July 1st, 2024 and end June 30th, 2025. So everything you need is on there, including general recommendations and personalized recommendations. So I'll tell you what the difference is in those. General recommendations are what the committee has come up with as just general tips for everybody that wants to make a presentation. It's kind of a one size fits all, everybody that's going to apply. It's something that could be applicable for them. The personalized recommendations are specific recommendations that the committee might have made at the end of the process last year. So those are attached to the email in case you want to look at that, because it could very likely be that the committee will look at what was recommended last year and they would perhaps ask you, have you done this or that? Not that they're trying to tell you exactly what to do, but they are making recommendations. That's what these are. So they might have some follow-up questions about that. So those would also be attached. So after you look over the information, you need to determine the responsibilities between the student organization leaders and advisors. In other words, who's going to do what, and make sure that somebody is doing everything that needs to be done and in a timely manner so that it'll be sent back so that you can be considered for all-campus allocations. So when you're determining responsibilities, I just want to say that sharing platforms do not work well with the templates. It's best if you just save a template to a desktop and everyone work from there. One person can be the person to enter the information, another person can come up with information, that's fine. But things like Google platforms and just any kind of sharing platform does not work well. It distorts the templates, and those submissions aren't going to be accepted if the templates are damaged. So it's best not to use a sharing platform when you do this. So once you complete your information, the written portion of the submission is due to the Student Affairs Business Office, and our email is there, sabo@uga.edu. Those have to be submitted by February 20th at 3 o'clock. Then supplemental information, that's better known as a brag sheet. What you might want the committee to know about your organization. You might provide photos of things you've done during the year. You might provide some kind of graphs or attendance numbers or any kind of thing that you think would be helpful for the committee to know more about your organization. And you submit that digitally on the same day that you submit the budget request back to SABO. And that would be an 8.5 by 11-inch sized paper. If you use any kind of photos or graphs or something, be sure to put some kind of captions there so the committee would understand what it is you want them to see from those items. You don't get a lot of time before the committee, so it's best to give them as much information as you can ahead of time. Okay. So the next part is the presentation, the actual presentation before the committee. And in the email that went out on January 31st, there is a time slot given in the body of the email and the room number in the Tate Center where you need to be that day to make your presentation. Every presentation is 15 minutes, but we recommend that you take 5 to 7 minutes or maybe 7 to 8 minutes to present, but be sure to leave time for the committee to ask you questions. And that committee is comprised of undergraduate and graduate students, some of which are representatives from SGA and others are cross-campus nominated representatives. And I will say they are not there to ask you tricky questions. They want to help you. They just want to hear what your allocation is. Be prepared to answer questions about what you're asking for. And that's really all they want to do is just hear your presentation and have time to ask you questions about it. At that time, you won't be able to hand out any information, no visuals, no laptops, nothing to that effect, unless you're just using notes for your own presentation purpose. You won't be able to hand out anything or show anything to the committee at that time. That would be something that you submit ahead of time if you so desire. Okay, next. A few mistakes to avoid. One is procrastination. Your presentation will reflect your lack of sufficient time given to preparation. And you might not be able to provide enough information if you don't give yourself time so that the committee usually really has a full idea of what your organization does over a year. Failing to read the instructions, that's also an attachment in the email. Be sure to read all the instructions first so that you'll know how to complete the templates and all the information that's going to be requested. Not balancing your budget request. It's only balanced if the income and expenses have the same total. And we'll go through that a little bit more in just a moment when we go through the example. We'll show you exactly what we're talking about. Forgetting to use whole numbers for budget projections. In other words, you don't budget $991.10. You budget $991 or $1,000 or whatever the number is that you arrive. There's no odd cents attached to budget information. Failing to supply supplemental brag sheets. That's not something that's mandatory, but it is something that is used by the committee members. So if you want them to know more information about your group, I would certainly suggest that you do that. Do not change any formats or appearance of the templates, including damaging locked cells or adding lines. The committee is going to have about 55 or so presentations to look at over a period of 3 days. And they are expecting to see the same number of pages, the same number of lines, the same information presented in the same way. Don't let your presentation be the one that doesn't conform to the way the presentation should look. If you add lines to your templates and they don't fit, nobody is going to be able to correct that for you. So there may be information missing. Something may be cut off, like your totals of what you're requesting. So please be careful. Like I said, don't use a sharing platform. That's one of the easiest ways to distort the templates and get them out of balance. So just try to keep the appearance of the templates exactly the way you receive them. Okay, now we'll go to a sample budget that Aiden's going to share. When you open the budget templates, the first thing you'll notice is the overview tab. You'll see all the tabs down at the bottom. This is obviously a very fake presentation. It's just basically for fun, other than we are going to show you the real places to put things and how to ask for it. So we're representing the Face Painting Club. The name of your organization will already be at the top. The first thing you want to do is add your mission statement, and then you want to add specific goals to achieve that mission. Some things that you're planning to do over the year so that you can fulfill the mission of your organization. So you can add 3 of those. Then you can go to the general organization information, put the number of members, just answer the question about membership dues, and if yes, how much per person. Then you answer the sources of generated income, and I will say now that you don't have to generate income, but if you do, if you collect dues, if you ask for donations, if you sell merchandise, if you sell tickets to any events, if you fundraise in any way, then answer the question and answer how much you expect to generate, how you're going to do it, and be able to tell eventually how much money you expect to generate, because you're going to use that number when you come up with the matching income to match up with the expenses that you're going to request that you want an allocation to pay for the year. So you would stop there, because letter D, the answer is going to come from something else that you're going to do. So for the moment, that's all you would answer. And we'll go down to the bottom of the page. We're going to skip the income and expenses for now, because that's going to come at the very end. So you'll see there's some previous student activity fee allocation information. That's the historical information that we've already completed for you, so you don't need to do anything there. And then I want you to note that at the bottom, there are explanations for everything that's being asked up there, where the red letters are there for answers. So that explains where that information is going to come from, some of which you can type into there and some of which you cannot. Okay, so we're going to work backwards. This is probably the easiest way to do this. We're going to start with fiscal year 23. And so I just put that we didn't receive an allocation for FY23, but probably most groups have done that. So if you don't have any information, then you can type on there that, you weren't left financial records or whatever, and you don't know about FY23. General expenses are things like copy paper or general supplies that aren't for a specific event or activity, like with a name of an activity, like a concert or a speaking event or something like that. So general expenses are just what they say. And also for general expenses, you include student travel, and you'll see the notes over on the side explain what's being asked for and what period of time you're supposed to be entering information for. Okay, so that would be general expenses. And then activity expenses, same thing. You fill out as much of the information as you know. If you don't know, or by any chance you didn't have an allocation last year, you can type in there, did not receive allocation, or don't have financial records from FY23. This is just information for the committee to have more knowledge about your group. Okay, then we'll move to FY24. Okay, that is the current fiscal year that you're operating in. So you should know what you did for the first semester, and you should certainly know what you're planning for the rest of this year, this second semester. We're close enough to the end that you should have specific plans. You should already be working up budgets for events or things like that. So you list general expenses here, and you'll see we listed some supplies, some things that were not going to be used for one specific event, but just things that we would have on supply for different types of things we might be doing the year. Then you see that we also included a travel request, student travel, and we listed the cost, and then we broke it out into what the hotel would be and what the registration would be. I suggest that if at all possible, you do this for any activities you're going to ask for money for, or for travel, because that's very likely a question that the committee might want some clarification on when you're making your verbal presentation. So it's best for you if you already have some notes to yourself, and it's perfectly fine to list them on these forms. That's fine. Just be able to respond to a question like that. And this is one of the best ways to respond. You already know the hotel is $600, the registration's $200. That's how you came up with your $800 request. Okay, then you would go to the FY24 activity expense. This is activities and events that your organization holds. If you do have general body meetings, I suggest that you group those together just to save space. You can see we put August through April. So you list the total attendance for those meetings, the total cost, and you see that it's going to divide and give you a cost per person after you do that. Again, we put how much we spent overall for food, for speakers, for advertising. Again, that's just to give yourself some notes that may help you if you're asked a question. You won't be put on the spot. You'll have information for how you came up with what that cost was. We had a game day tailgate. You'll see the expenses for that. Tabling supplies, and again, you'll see that was repetitive. So we totaled the attendance for all of that, the cost for all of those, and that gave a cost per person for those expenses. Then you see we're getting to some things that haven't occurred yet, but again, you're into the second semester, so you should certainly know what you're going to do and be able to speak to the financial part of that. So we listed the spring formal, the attendance we're estimating, but you should probably have some knowledge of having this type of event before. More than likely you've had a lot of this type of event. So you have to rely on some historical perspective, some people who were in the group the year before or whatever, to get some information about what you should expect from this. Then we're going to have an end of year annual recognition event. And again, we broke out the cost that we're expecting for that. Let me caution you here with your attendance numbers. I know that there are summarizations that are required in the involvement network. And I will say that the committee has access to those numbers. So be careful that you confirm what your numbers were reported so that you don't make a mistake in what you might put down here. So now we're going to go to the end of this form, and you're going to see the total attendance for FY24. You see the number 1,440. If you click over to the overview, you'll see that that number carried over, and that's where you got the answer to the letter D blank. It now has that number there. If for any reason you were to think that number is incorrect, you can't change it on the overview page. Go back to your activity expense and correct something there so that the number changes to what you feel is more realistic. But again, I caution you that it should match the numbers that are reported, or the numbers that are reported through, if you have tickets sold through the ticket office, those numbers are reported anyway. They keep the reports for the organizations. So that's an easy way to get that. If you've had something sold through the ticket office in the past year, if you can't come up with the numbers, there's a report that can be pulled for you with the number for your event. Okay, so after you've done that, then you'll go to the requested general expenses for FY25. Again, keep in mind that you're asking for an entire year. It'll be July 1st, 2024 through June 30, 2025. You're asking for general supplies and include any travel, student travel requests there, should you have any. Not everyone has that, but if you have it, this is where it would go. We're not real hard and fast rules about what is a general expense, what's an activity or an event or whatever. It's kind of up to you, but most things that have a named event where you're publicizing it, that's going to be an activity or event. Tabling, if you repetitively do that, or if you have general body meetings, the same thing applies to those. Those are general activities normally, but it's kind of up to you. Just go with it. We don't really care. Just try to put as much information as you can on there. So once you complete the general expenses, you can go down to the bottom of the form and you see the total expected cost is $1,945. Then you go to the overview page and you'll see that number has carried over to the general expenses. So that's what you feel you're going to need for that for the year. So you just leave that number there. If you don't feel the number is right, again, you can't change it on the overview page. You go back to your expense page and change something there. That would change your total, and then it would in turn carry over to your overview page. Okay, then you would go to the activity expense page. The same thing we talked about before, put as much information as you can, break out the information to the best of your ability, answer the questions. Once you put the attendance and the cost, it's going to give you the cost per person. You should list all the expenses that relate to the activity or the event. That can include a lot of things: advertising, venue rentals, and tech supplies, tech people, technicians, whatever, any kind of things that you need, food. If you're going to pay an honorarium to a speaker or an entertainer or something, all kinds of things can be involved in there. Decorations that you purchase. I mean, there's all kinds of things. So think carefully and put your cost in to the best of your ability. And then when you go to the bottom of this form, you'll see the total there, $9,900. Again, you go back to the overview page, and that number has carried over to the activity expense request for the year. So those numbers are going to total. You see that we feel our budget would be $11,845. And at that point, if you agree with that, if you think that's what you need to operate for your organization for the year, then the only thing left for you to do is go over to the left side where you see the income. You have to be sure income and expenses match. Those totals have to be the same. So first of all, if you indicated that you're going to generate any money, if you answered yes to that question and you put like dues and ticket sales like we have here, then in the generated income, you have to estimate how much you expect to generate, and you put that number there. If you don't generate money, that's fine. That's not a requirement to go before all-campus allocations. But if you are going to generate money, if you expect to do so, then you're expected to put a number here. So at that point, you would take the number that you put in for generated income and you subtract that from the overall total money that you're going to need for income in order to balance with your expense request. So in this case, we subtracted $900 from $11,845. So what you're asking the committee for in allocation is $10,945. Then you just double check that you have the same total for the income as well as the expenses. Once you've got that, you are good to go, and you'll be ready to submit it back to the Student Affairs Business Office by February 20th at 3 o'clock. Okay, does anybody have any questions about the templates? All right, if not, we'll give it back to Rachel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, June and Aiden. You all are certainly the experts in this process, and I really appreciate y'all being here today to talk through it. As you can tell from all-campus allocations, for our process for fundraising for one time, I think a key takeaway is we love details, and so please be detailed in everything that you do. If you ever have any questions too, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again with the last slide of our presentation, which has the contact information both for engagement, leadership, and service, as well as for the Student Affairs Business Office. Please feel free to reach out to either one of our offices depending on your question, or if you reach out to one of us and it tends to be for the other, we chat a lot. We'd be happy to redirect you to where you need to go. So I've listed those phone numbers, emails, and locations there. Both of our offices are located on the first floor of Tate Student Center if you want to come by in person and talk through your question as well. But I wanted to leave some space. If there's any questions that you have specifically, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this time in just a moment.